I like the movie. I regard it as a different entity from the book, which is the way I can appreciate it. They are separate with a thin thread connecting them. These two examples prove that an idea, in this case, obedience, is minimally important, and the expression of the idea is everything. It's why an idea can't be copyrighted.
Ella Enchanted is a 1997 Newbery Honor novel written by Gail Carson Levine. Ella Enchanted is also a 2004 film written by Laurie Craig, Karen McCullough, Kirsten Smith, Jennifer Heath, and Michelle J. Wolfe, directed by Tommy O'Haver, and starring the likes of Anne Hathaway, Hugh Dancy, Carrie Elwes, Joanna Lumley, Minnie Driver, Lucy Punch, Vivica A. Fox, and Eric Idle. The film is nominally an adaptation of the novel, maintaining its basic premise as a retelling of Cinderella, in which the title princess-to-be is cursed to obey any command phrased as an order as literally as possible, regardless of the intentions of the person giving it, but the similarities very nearly end there. And if you, like me, were a bookish young person in the late 90s and early 2000s, that probably makes some amount of your blood boil. Gail Carson Levine is a veritable titan of the pink aisle of books for young readers who had the market absolutely cornered during my girlhood. Her work was somewhat of a set of sacred texts for me and many other baby nerds in the early aughts. So when a film adaptation of Ella Enchanted was announced, there was sort of a feeling that this was bookworm representation in Hollywood. This was our story being told to the cool kid market. And what was sold under the name Ella Enchanted was not Ella Enchanted. It was an outrage, or at least that's how I saw it at the age of 13. It's been almost 20 years, and while Ella Enchanted the book has loomed large in the story of my childhood, Ella Enchanted the movie has mostly faded from my memory. But I've heard enough people I usually respect remember it so fondly that I can't help but wonder if I was unfair to it. Scratch that, I am extremely confident I was unfair to it. I was mad that the first 2 Harry Potter movies weren't faithful enough to the books. My evaluation of Ella Enchanted was unquestionably that of a little shit. In an interview included with the 20th anniversary edition of the book, Levine says,
Ella Enchanted was released long before the movie script was written. Many kids come to the book these days after watching the movie. When there was just the book, comparisons could be made between it and the Cinderella fairy tale, but now a 3-way comparison is possible. I like that.
So that's what we're gonna do today. We're gonna take an honest look at this movie. We're gonna look at it on its own terms, we're gonna look at it in comparison to the book and to its other influences, and we're gonna see if I can't just find something to like about it. So first, what the book and the movie share. There is, of course, Ella's curse, a theoretically well-intentioned but drastically misguided gift from a notorious fuck-up of a fairy named Lucinda. Ella's mother, on her deathbed, has already seen how the curse can wreck Ella's life and orders her never to tell anyone about it, leaving her housekeeper and literal fairy godmother, Mandy, as the only other person in the know other than Lucinda and Ella herself. Ella meets Prince Charmant, Char, to his friends, and they keep bumping into each other and slowly fall in love. Ella's traveling salesman father marries the rich Dame Olga, who comes as a package deal with 2 daughters named Hattie and Olive, the latter of whom is not particularly smart and is easily taken advantage of by her more clever sister, who quickly figures out about Ella's curse and uses that knowledge shamelessly and frequently. In particular, Hattie orders Ella to end things with her only true friend, Arita, for reasons that are at least partly to do with racism. Ella decides to find Lucinda to see if she can get her to remove the curse, and on the journey she is hosted by a village of elves, is almost eaten by a band of ogres before being saved by Char, and attends the wedding of a pair of giants. When Ella eventually finds Lucinda, she declines to lift the curse, but she does help her get to the ball where she is reunited with Char until midnight. Ella ultimately breaks the curse herself when Char proposes, and finally free to do as she pleases, she marries him. So those basic basic bones of a plot are shared between both versions of the story, but the connecting beats, character motivations, order, rhythm, and tone, tying them all together, differ wildly. That said, I'm here to do my damnedest to like this movie, and adaptational changes are not inherently bad. Take, for example, the climax of the story. In the book, Ella has realized that even if she and Char both love each other and desperately want to be married, she is too much of a liability to him and to the kingdom to go through with it. She instigates some tragic shenanigans, but Char eventually does propose, and inadvertently orders her to say yes. She has a massive internal fight and eventually succeeds in saying no, thus breaking the whole curse. So, when the film adaptation was announced, even I, an obnoxious teenage devotee of the book always, always, always being better, was able to recognize that there was a bit of a problem with this fantasy novel filled with centaurs and elves and fairy magic and skirmishes with ogres and a feast of literally giant food and big beautiful balls with a carriage that turns back into a pumpkin when the clock strikes midnight, where the climax, the most dramatic moment on which the whole story turns, is a girl sitting silently in a chair and then saying no. It's not very cinematic. The film tackles this by skipping over Ella's realization that she could be ordered to kill Char and just having someone order her to kill Char, specifically his conniving and power-hungry Uncle Edgar, who gets Hattie to spill the beans by promising she can marry Char once Ella's out of the picture.
Ella does everything she's told. I don't know why, but she does.
Char tells Edgar of his plan to propose to Ella, and Edgar orders her to stab him when he does. Ella tries to physically fight the order, but Lucinda shows up and is her whole Lucinda self.
Just to prove what a gem I am, I'll unchain you.
What? No! No!
And the proposal goes forward as planned, but Ella manages to disobey the order and break the whole curse in the process by issuing herself a new commandment in the mirror.
You will no longer be obedient!
This change takes the stakes of Char's proposal out of Ella's literarily readable mind and into the cinematically portrayable physical realm, and it gives their romantic arc a proper long dark night of the soul. Oh my god, you tried to kill me, I can't believe I trusted you, before finishing the story off with the proper bang of a good old-fashioned fantasy battle. But more importantly, it gives us Cary Elwes as Edgar. Oh my sweet Wesley, what have you done? This man is having the time of his life. He has spent all day slaving over a 5-course dinner in which each dish is a different preparation of the scenery, and he ravenously devours every bite and licks the plates clean. It is impossible not to be charmed by a movie with this performance in it.
You vile little girl.
Anyway, the way Ella breaks her curse by issuing herself an order, something she actually tries in the book but to no avail, is also indicative of another major adaptational change, which is the treatment of the curse in general. In the book, commands primarily affect Ella mentally. She has physical symptoms if she resists following an order, but she also feels a mental compulsion, probably most obvious when Lucinda, rather than removing the curse, tells Ella to be happy to have this gift, and Ella suddenly is. It's such an unsettlingly disturbing section of the book, but it only really works with first-person narration. So the movie, very smartly I would say, makes the curse a primarily physical phenomenon. When Ella is given an order, her body responds instantly, even when her mind is clearly opposed.
Now touch your toes.
Oh! Oh no.
And even in ways that should be physically impossible.
Freeze!
This is much more functional in a visual medium where we can't read Ella's thoughts, and it has the added bonus of amping up the sense of fairy tale whimsy. Which leads me to the musical numbers. The musical numbers. I remember these being a particular sticking point for me as a kid, because there's really no tonal basis for them at all in the book. They're a completely new addition. Needless to say, I was not a fan, because the book is always better. Why would you change things? Well, One reason might be that you hired Tommy O'Haver to direct. O'Haver's body of work isn't the most robust or high profile, but it does show a pretty clear trajectory toward this particular element of Ella Enchanted. His debut feature, Billy's Hollywood Screen Kiss, is a really sweet and human and gay and honestly heartbreaking auteur self-insert wrestles with unrequited love and capital A art kind of quarter-life indie project. Probably my favorite take on that very particular subgenre I've seen in a long time. It's not streaming anywhere that I could find, but I was able to get it on DVD from my public library, and I'd absolutely recommend it. His second feature credit, and the one for which he was better known during the marketing of Ella Enchanted, 2001's Get Over It, is a significantly more straight teen romantic comedy about a high school boy named Burke trying to get back with his ex-girlfriend Allison, despite the machinations of her new boyfriend Stryker and girl next door Kelly, by joining the cast of a production of A Midsummer Night's Dream. Which means you know what time it is! A Midsummer Night's Dream may not be the most famous of William Shakespeare's plays by name, but I'd bet money it is the single most produced in this particular corner of history. It has a giant ensemble cast that can be expanded or doubled pretty much as far as you need in either direction. You can make it work with 5 actors or 50, at least 7 of them are going to be playing their dream role, and most of the rest will get a chance to run away with the whole show. And it's a really accessible and fun story from the audience side of things. It checks so many boxes that it is rarely a question of if an actor has been in this play or if a theater company has previously put it on their season. It is a question of how many times. So while I have perhaps an unfair level of expertise since I've been in this play twice and a half, that's a level of expertise shared by basically anyone who has ever been even tangentially interested in regularly viewing or working in any theater, especially classical theater. So bitch, you damn well better get it more right than this shit.
Our intent is to leave Athens, where we may be married.
That's the wrong tense for those verbs. Those lines come from the end of the play when they already tried and failed to run away. Ding! And it really seems like this movie was written by a guy who just picked this scene at random and read or saw none of the rest of the play. This scene is not that interesting. Why do we see it 3 separate times? Ding!
When thou wakest, thou wilt take true delight in the sight of thy true lover's eye.
This is literally where all of the tension starts wrapping up. Your audience is gonna think the play is over if you pause it here. The only reason to put intermission there is it's the end of Act 3 of 5, so it might seem like decent math if you haven't read or seen the play your movie is based on. Ding!
My lord, we slept and slept. As well you know, things did change. As love did grow.
If you're gonna emulate Shakespearean text, it rarely needs to rhyme. What it needs is iambic pentameter. Any high schooler who has read Shakespeare in English class would know that. Absolutely one who has been rehearsing a production of a Shakespeare play directed by an overbearing Martin Short would. And besides, iambic pentameter is actually way easier to improvise. Ding!
Although, in ways fair Hermia's soul and mine shall forever intertwine. Alas, we must forever part, for lo, to another belongs this heart.
Lysander is the one who is always going to run away with Hermia. The audience is not gonna think it's cute if he suddenly wants Helena instead. Puck already made that happen and everybody just fought forever. She's happy with Demetrius. This is not a sweet and cuddly turn for this love story. Ding! If this was gonna work as a story structure, Burke absolutely needed to be playing Demetrius, the guy who starts the play convinced he's in love with Hermia and ends it realizing he's in love with Helena. You're mixing your messages if he's playing Lysander. It's a fucking mess. Ding!
To be or not to be? That is the question.
That is not the monologue Hamlet gives while holding the skull, for fuck's sake! Ding! 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 They never show the mechanicals, so I can't even steal Kyle Colgren's joke about how the greatest error of all the rest is that the man should be put into the lantern. How else is it the man of the moon? Ding! Anyway, none of that is O'Haver's fault. He didn't write the thing, he just directed it. And what he directs is a movie that may not understand Shakespeare, but sure does deeply and unironically love a high school musical. And a movie musical, with a whole in-character number, a oneer no less to kick it off, and an out-of-character dance party to end it, released a whole month before Shrek made that de rigueur. More on that later. What's clear from both films of his pre-Ella work is that O'Haver has a real sensibility for crafting musical sequences that combine the larger-than-life glitter you'd get from a Gene Kelly joint with this more intimate, indie kind of verve of like a local non-union theater company. So it's no surprise that Ella Enchanted's musical numbers are pretty much its strongest choice, both in the sense of being an original contribution to the film that really pull it in a direction, and in the sense of being its absolute high points. For our passing mentions, the elves sing Let Us Entertain You when Ella and her traveling companion Slannon show up in their town, and there's a little lack of polish combined with an overabundance of enthusiasm to their choreography that I find really charming and very in line with O'Haver's style. We also get to linger on the way the giants dance at the wedding, and there's a really neat kind of fusion going on that I very much enjoy. There's like some salsa, some Bollywood, some ballet. It's very cool. But the real points of note are these big jukebox musical showstoppers. First, the very drunk giants at the wedding try to get Slannon to sing them a song because Slannon is an elf, and this is a world where elves are assumed and mandated by law, put a pin in it, to be performers. But Slannon is not into it. He wants to be a lawyer. So Ella tries to shut that shit down, which leads the giants to tell her to sing instead. And so of course she has to, and she sings Queen's Somebody to Love. It's a really sweet sequence with just enough choreography to make it feel, larger than life, but it's simple enough to leave space for Anne Hathaway to just fucking crush it. She has just so many great little moments when you can see Ella start to find her confidence a little, surprise herself with what she can do, and enjoy being able to do it, realize the power in what she's singing, and really dig in on it. Just a superb performance, and O'Haver really has a sense of exactly how to both support her and give her space. It does make it all that much more baffling a choice when one of the giants tells Ella to dance, and the camera barely holds on her for long enough to establish that she is dancing before cutting away to all the instrumentalists and a gag with Edgar's snake who's spying on them. But you know, for the most part, it's a fun and clever little sequence. The movie as a whole treats Ella's curse mostly as a silly annoyance that only occasionally has dark consequences, and putting Ella in a room full of drunk wedding guests is a really cute way to play in that sandbox that does actually end up feeling relatively harmless.
Give a little more soul.
And who doesn't love a good, oh whoops, we're cheek-to-cheek rom-com beat? And then there's the big finale where Ella and Char and everyone else at their wedding sing Elton John's Don't Go Breaking My Heart. Char sings a command to Ella. Don't go breaking my heart. And she gets to think about it before responding. I'll go breaking your heart. Very cute, see what you did there. And who doesn't love a band of dancing ogres? People who aren't worth being friends with, that's who. Again, there are a handful of sort of odd edits where you lose the geography of the space and the continuity of movement a little bit, but at the very least it's cut on the beat, and the downbeat is consistent from shot to shot, so, you know, I don't hate fun enough to harp on this any more than that. But see, this introduction of these pop songs starts to reveal something really crucial about this movie. While it is an adaptation of the book Ella Enchanted in the sense that it plays with its same basic premise and plot outline, the book Ella Enchanted is not really a strong influence on the film itself. It's there as a nod and the occasional Easter egg for superfans, but there might ultimately be much more to be gleaned from looking at the much more loving influences O'Haver, McCullough, Smith, and co. wear on their sleeve.
Somebody once told me the world is gonna roll me.
Shrek is a 2001 animated film written by... What the fuck am I doing? This is the internet. It's Shrek. You know about Shrek. But like, okay, it's been over 20 years. Shrek may currently be Shrek, but my dude, Shrek has always been Shrek. This movie was a box office smash. It outperformed the goddamn Lion King. Roger Ebert loved it. This shit was selected and shown at Cannes. It won the first ever Oscar for Best Animated Feature, and it was nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay, in the same category as The Fellowship of the Ring and A Beautiful Mind. Shrek was already fucking Shrek. And so, apparently, was Ella Enchanted.
It's more like a sort of Shrek-y type humor.
It really is like a cross between Wizard of Oz and Shrek. And
we got a score full of pop tunes. We got a prince with a squealing fan club. We got a mall with escalators and punny names and some kind of vague but totally undirected sense that if it imitates the cadence of satire convincingly enough, it can cash in on all of the laughs without ever having to make a point.
Try our new perfume.
We got fairy tale creatures being rounded up by the secret police and told where to go and what to do. We got a fairy tale romance between characters who are openly contemptuous of the idea of being in a fairy tale romance.
Don't need your chivalry. Thanks. And I've no intention of curtsying either, so forget it.
We got a pair of traveling companions who are constantly sniping at each other.
What is he, like about 6 foot?
Yeah, about.
Yeah, I hate the guy already. I'm not wasting my time.
Lacking courage as well as height.
We got a princess who does martial arts. In case it's not clear, I read this as a pretty surface level and honestly par for the course of the early 2000s. It doesn't feel like it comes out of any kind of deep passion for this kind of storytelling, but on the scale of other movies that were doing the same thing around this time, it doesn't really feel like a shallow cash grab. The scene where Ella rescues Slannon honestly does hew just a little too close for comfort to Fiona's fight with the Merry Men to my eye, but for the most part, Shrek was just an honest-to-goodness cultural reset. This sensibility became synonymous with lighthearted reimaginings of fairy tales in a way that is still true to some extent now, over 20 years later. It's a little easier to pick out the individual pieces this close to patient zero, but on the whole, it's nothing to really write home about.
Shouldn't believe everything you read in Medieval Teen.
The one thing I will say about Shrek is about Fiona. I love Fiona so very much. And I think that most of the pale imitations we've seen over the past 20 years really miss what's so great about her. Because it's not just that she is a kung fu badass. That's really cool, but it's not sufficient definition for an entire character. What's great about Fiona is that she is an honest and fleshed out exploration of what is so appealing about the narrative of being a beautiful princess swept off her feet by a handsome prince, what it might take for someone who has been force-fed a lifetime of that Kool-Aid to get stoked about personally subverting it, and what that subversion might ultimately make space for. I've made a whole video about this in the past, but the relevant point here is that, irreverent humor and all, the movie and the franchise as a whole never mocks Fiona for wanting her fairy tale. It strips that desire down, critiques it, and enthusiastically endorses an alternative, but it never loses sight of the fact that that desire came from somewhere, and she is not inherently wrong or silly or disempowered or worthy of derision for having it. Maybe keep a pin in that. But if we're going to talk about fairy tale love stories, there's a different influence we're going to need to dig into, one that clearly comes from a place of honest admiration. Ever After is a 1998 film written by Susanna Grant, Andy Tennant, and Rick Parks, directed by Tennant, and starring, most relevantly to this discussion, Drew Barrymore and Dougray Scott. It is a Cinderella story exploring true in its universe events that were, in universe, eventually fictionalized into the fable we all know and love. It occasionally takes pains to explain away the most fantastical elements. This version's fairy godmother is literal Leonardo da Vinci, for example, but for the most part, it focuses simply and honestly on the love story between the prince and the servant girl. It is easily among my top 10 movies of all time, and if you're watching this video right now, I have to assume you have seen it, because otherwise, why are you wasting your time here when you could be watching Ever After?
And while Cinderella and her prince did live happily ever after, the point, gentlemen, is that they live. The movie's Cinderella and Prince Charming, Danielle and Henry, meet by happenstance and fall in love in their own time.
I mean, in a week, but still. Danielle is doing her best to keep her childhood home alive and its staff, of whom she has become one and who are more or less the only real family she has, together, while her titled stepmother is stripping the whole estate for parts to maintain the illusion of wealth.
This is our home, and I will not see it fall apart.
Henry is rebelling against the straight and narrow his father is trying to keep him on, specifically an arranged marriage as part of the terms of a treaty with Spain, which also means he is completely disconnected from the country he will one day rule.
I will simply deny you the crown and live forever.
Agreed. I don't want it.
Technically, they meet when Henry borrows a horse from Danielle's stable to escape the royal guard, and she throws apples at him until he falls off, but really they meet when Danielle takes the money Henry used to bribe her not to tell anyone the wayward crown prince rode through her orchard that morning, and makes the risky move of impersonating a courtier to buy back the human being her stepmother has sold into slavery so she can buy more jewelry.
If the Baroness can sell your husband to pay her taxes, then these can certainly bring him home.
It takes a little persuading, but Henry himself is moved, in part by the mystery of this beautiful unknown woman, and sparks start to fly as they quote and debate political theory.
Anyone who can quote Thomas More is well worth the effort.
The prince has read Utopia.
I found it sentimental and dull.
As they get to know one another, Danielle's fire gives Henry a perspective on politics that fits with his desire for rebellion, and her heart gives him a sense of why government matters to the governed.
I want to build a university with the largest library on the continent where anyone can study, no matter their station.
All right. Who are you? What have you done with our son?
And Henry's oyster of a world expands the scope of Danielle's idealism, just as his care and attention put her in touch with her dormant sense of playfulness and joy.
Swim alone, climb rocks, rescue servants. Is there anything you don't do?
Fly.
They rise to the occasion of one another's wit, and they each give the other an occasion to rise to. So those of you familiar with Ella Enchanted the movie may be noticing some similarities. Ella and Char meet early in the runtime when Ella has an altercation related to a political action she's staged, and Char is fleeing his fan club. Ella immediately kicks off a political debate about issues Char is generally ignorant of because he is entirely disinterested in being king.
So you have a new plan once you take the crown?
Well, sort of.
As he and Ella keep bumping into each other, he is slowly able to open his eyes to the way his uncle has fucked up the kingdom and the power he has to do something about it.
I promise, first thing after my coronation, I'll help you buy your farms back.
Which unfortunately means that before we can go any further, we need to talk about the politics of the world of Ella Enchanted. This is more or less a completely new addition for the movie. The various fairy tale creatures all exist in the book and have significant cultural differences, and a major difference between Ella and her father, who, unlike in the movie, is a real shithead to the point that there's subtext that he probably abused his wife, is that he approaches that diversity with an eye toward how he can exploit it for profit, while Ella, with her talent for languages, is open-hearted and curious. The movie distills this down to this kingdom being flagrantly and systemically racist, and Ella being an activist. Interesting enough, Levine has blogged about how she actually included similar ideas in an earlier draft of the book, but ended up scrapping the whole angle because it weighed that version of the story down. She thought it was cool to see the screenwriter choose to elaborate on it even though it didn't come from the book or from her notes. It's nice. So under Edgar's rule, the elves are barred by law from being employed in any line of work other than entertainment, and the giants have had their land seized and are forced to work it under the authority of the government, where they are at best overworked and poorly treated, and at worst, literally enslaved. It's never quite made clear. There's a romance between Ella's elf friend Slannon and Brunhilde, a giant played by Heidi Klum, who have to overcome their biases about one another, and to some extent bond over the shared experience of being the victims of stereotyping.
Elves aren't that short, you know. That's just a myth created by that stupid Elves and the Shoemaker story.
Oh, I know. Giants are supposed to be big, ugly, and mean. It's because of stories like Jack and the Beanstalk. Stinking Grimm brothers.
So at this point, this is serviceable, right? It's definitely a little shallow in that racism is very much painted as an active thing that individual evil people do. These policies about the elves and the giants are new developments under the rule of the literally mustache-twirling Edgar, and Char is only passively on board because Edgar has flat out lied about what he was enacting.
I'm sure my uncle doesn't know about this. Couldn't.
But to the movie's credit, there is at least a hint between the lines of the way bigotry can be leveraged by those in power. It's not radical that scum of the earth Hattie is pretty much okay with slavery.
He has put giants and elves to work as laborers and entertainers. Therefore, if it weren't for him, we wouldn't have today's thriving free enterprise system.
But first and foremost, she's on board with Char being dreamy. So you can at least start to wonder whether even she might be less inclined to be on board if she weren't already the president of the prince's fan club.
You know, Char and his uncle are responsible for the segregation of the kingdom.
So? He's dreamy.
Or if his uncle's fascism weren't presented by her school as one equally weighted side of the coin and very much up for debate.
What my unworthy opponent fails to realize is that Edgar has done a fantastic job.
So up to this point, this is nothing groundbreaking, but there are far clumsier racism allegories set in fantasy worlds. And then you meet the ogres. So the thing about the ogres is they eat people. They attack them when they're minding their own business, and then they eat them. That's not a racist lie. It's not used as justification to oppress them, although it is used as justification to oppress the elves and giants. But it is also a thing that is true about the way the ogres live their lives. They eat people. Literally. Physically. It's not clear if there is an alternate food source that provides them with the nutrition they need to be alive and healthy. They eat people. It's a thing they do. Important to note, this is true of the ogres in the book as well. They are terrifying creatures who can hypnotize people with their voices. Ella's curse makes it easier for them to control her, but for once, she's not unique in that regard, and they use that power to eat people. They're treated more or less like predatory wild animals. They're not part of society, but society is able to live in some level of symbiosis with them by observing them, learning how to protect themselves, and giving them as wide a berth as possible. Certainly this brings up some potential questions about the world, if that's how you like to spend your time, but nothing nearly so significant as when these same creatures are framed as the victims of systemic racist oppression. So the deal here is, Edgar says that Char's father was eaten by ogres.
The ogres were peaceful too, until they ripped your father to shreds.
That turns out to be a lie that he used to cover up the fact that he killed Char's father as a ploy to take the throne himself.
Kill your own nephew?
No, why not? I killed my own brother.
So in terms of the racism allegory, the idea is the people of this kingdom are so primed to believe that ogres are violent creatures who eat people,
stinking Grimm brothers,
that of course they won't look too hard at the story that some ogres ate their king. But here's the thing about these ogres. They are violent creatures who eat people. They are! The fact that they didn't eat this one guy is important information because it means that the kingdom has an otherwise undealt with problem of having a fratricide traitor on the throne, but they have that problem in addition to the problem of sharing a universe with ogres who eat people. The tiny amount of lip service paid to this being an overblown stereotype is that the ogres who are in the process of trying to eat Ella are deeply hurt at the allegation that they could have eaten Char's father.
King Florian was a good man. We lived in peace during this reign. Why would he kill him?
But all that tells us is that ogres didn't eat this one guy. They still eat people. Ella, who has previously led a protest for ogres' rights, tries to be diplomatic with them. You know, she's an ally.
Ella Frel, hi, how you doing?
And they immediately do their best to eat her.
It'll only hurt for a moment, I promise. I'm a fast eater.
It is not racist oppression to say that ogres eat people. It's an apparently biological need that they actually have. If the ogres from the book are gonna be part of the racism allegory in the movie, they need to generally not eat people. This is an easy win. Just have Char swoop in to save Ella, like, I'm here to stop you from eating that woman, and then have the ogres explain that this was all a misunderstanding surrounding a cultural practice that is definitely not actually about eating people, which they don't do. That's a weird racist lie, just like elves being short and only wanting to sing and dance, or giants being ugly and saying fee fi fo fum. This would change nothing about the rest of the course of the story. The book's elves don't sing and dance. You're allowed to change things to better fit your adaptation. Oh my fucking god! And then there's the matter of intraspecies racism, which is pointed entirely at Ella's friend Arita.
Arita, what a stupid name!
Specifically, there is an incident where Ella is arrested for stealing a bunch of stuff and is getting a scolding from Olga. Mandy tries to point the blame back to Hattie and Olive, under whose orders Ella did the stealing.
Maybe she was put up to it.
But Hattie redirects immediately.
Mandy's right, Mother.
So Olga orders Ella to break off her friendship with the presumed criminal, and scum of the earth Hattie has one last barb with which to ice the cake.
Tell her you could never be friends with an Aorthian.
Now, on a lot of levels, this works just fine. It does contribute to that idea of racism being a mean thing that a few bad apples do, but it enriches rather than conflicting with the world building around interspecies racism. This is a racist society in a number of different directions. It just kinda sucks to not be a human from Frel. And this moment is given an appropriate weight in the story.
I could never be friends with an Aorthian. Just go.
It's the most sincere tone we see in the entire movie, and it's the straw that breaks Ella's back and convinces her it's time to track down Lucinda and get this whole mess sorted out. But notice, the weight that this moment is given is for Ella.
I've done terrible things before, Mandy, but this is the worst thing the curse has ever made me do.
It is sad for her to be forced to be fucking racist to her best friend, but the person who has to live with the actual fallout of apparently finding out that her best friend is disgustingly fucking racist toward her disappears from the story without another word until she catches the bouquet at Ella's wedding. No apology, no explanation, ever. Not even in the deleted scenes, mind you. Nobody thought this needed to be addressed because the totality of its weight in a movie that purports to be about racism and activism is that Ella being forced to do racism was super fucking hard for her. In the book, for the record, this is handled differently, and I would argue significantly less clumsily. It happens when the girls are away at boarding school, and Hattie gives the order alone and without the pretext of framing her for making Ella steal stuff. There is definitely racist subtext. The other girls at school make fun of Arita's accent, and Hattie tells Ella that she can't be associating with the lower orders like that wench from Aortha, but the focus is clearly on the fact that this is an abuse tactic on Hattie's part. She is trying to make Ella's life miserable, and the racism and classism of it all happen to be a decent smokescreen. And an apology actually doesn't end up being necessary, because the order Hattie gives is simply that Ella must end her friendship with Arita, and Ella is able to fulfill the letter of the order by running away from boarding school, because in this case, the inciting moment for the journey is just that Ella hears about the giant wedding, and it's the first time she's ever known where she might be able to find Lucinda. So in a lot of ways, this is weaker from a structural standpoint. Ella is a much less active protagonist if she finds out about Lucinda's whereabouts at a convenient point that also lets her coincidentally skip out on doing the one thing in the world she really doesn't want to do, than if she has to do a really terrible thing, and that motivates her to take a big step she's never quite had a good enough reason to take. I will absolutely acknowledge that it's not the novel's strongest story beat, but it does have the undeniable advantage of not making your heroine spew racist vitriol, which she will never have to acknowledge or apologize for. Actually, this is a good moment to mention another major difference between the book and the movie, which is Ella's rebellious nature. Both versions of the character are relative spitfires, but there's a difference in the quality of the fire they spit. In the book, this is something Ella learns very deliberately. She is extremely good at obeying the letter of commands without obeying the spirit. Occasionally, this allows for meaningful outcomes, like being able to end her friendship with Arita in a way that doesn't shut that door forever or even really hurt her. But for the most part, it is just the way Ella is able to exert some control over her own life, even and especially when it doesn't really matter. When her father tells her to come closer, she takes one step. When her singing teacher tells her to sing louder or softer, she alternates between bellowing and whispering. When Hattie orders her to kneel down and remove her slippers, Ella throws them out the window and into a bucket of slop. She often knows that there will be consequences for these moments of obedient disobedience, but she does it anyway because it is worth it to her to assert what agency she can. She is smart, and she is deliberate. The movie pays brief lip service to this particular kind of rebellion.
Ella, come practice your mandolin.
Fine, but I'll take my own sweet time doing it.
Hurry up now.
But it doesn't really do much with the idea beyond that. I'd argue that this is in large part an unfortunate consequence of the movie's more physical interpretation of Ella's curse. Unlike book Ella, who gets some mental say in how she obeys, when movie Ella is given a command, she loses control of her body and responds instantly. That moment when Olga questions her about what happened at the mall is actually one that had me jumping out of my chair yelling at the screen, because per the book's rules, Ella doesn't need to blame Arita. Hattie orders her to, but then Olga says,
"Tell me who's to blame."
Book Ella would hear this as a separate command. Who's to blame is Hattie and Olive. The curse would not just allow, but require her to spill the real beans, the ones Hattie is trying to keep in the jar. But movie Ella is still compelled to repeat Hattie's lie. I don't know why that is. It seems to be one of the ways in which the curse just functions a little differently in the movie, aside from the obvious utility of making it more physical. There's also a bit of a sense that commands hit differently depending on Ella's relationship to the person giving them. When Hattie or Edgar or the police or the ogres who want to eat her order her around, her body responds immediately and to the letter, even if her brain is clearly annoyed or frightened by it. But when Arita, perhaps inadvertently, gives her an order, it's like it allows her to do something she really needed to do anyway.
Yes, you do.
I don't.
Tell the truth.
Oh, I do.
Eventually, it seems like Char's accidents of wording don't affect her at all.
Kiss me. But that wasn't an order, you know.
I know.
This is actually a really interesting element to add, but its potential is never really fully explored, and it has wildly different implications from the book that are never really thematically addressed. And meanwhile, we're left with an Ella who, rather than being a whip-smart planner who has, at least to some extent, adapted to this curse she's been carrying for her whole life, seems to constantly forget and have to be reminded that she can't just do what she wants, that the punishment for any toe she steps out of line could be so much worse than for any other normal girl. Her rebelliousness seems like it came from a completely different character. Mayhap a character who could embody...
In all those old fairy tales, the girl's usually powerless.
I wish I'd grown up on a fairy tale like this. Ella's kind of empowerment and how sassy and cool this girl is.
What I liked about the story was it sort of took an old-fashioned fairy tale and turned it on its end and made it much more about girl power.
We should cut there so I can get more rosé for this. Girl power. The power for girls. We've all heard about it, but what is it really? As I see it, girl power has two main tenets, each of which appear in a number of common expressions. Girl power tenet number 1, girls can do anything they want. True. At its best, this is an acknowledgement that there are certain societal restrictions on the aesthetics and activities typically encouraged or allowed for girls, but that these are not innately biological, and girls should be allowed and encouraged to pursue whatever the heck they want. Consider Fiona. I've argued before that there is considerable textual evidence that Fiona chose to learn martial arts of her own volition because she wanted to, even though it might not be considered a typical or acceptable princess activity. So then we get like Shrek the Third, where she's having a happy girly baby shower with her gal pals, and suddenly the kingdom is under attack, so she teaches them all to fight so they can rescue themselves. This isn't so much a commentary on the other princesses who have previously chosen to spend their time on more traditionally princessy pursuits, as it is an opportunity for Fiona to flex it at a skill she's incredibly good at that has suddenly become super relevant, and share her passion with her friends. From another angle, consider Elle Woods of Legally Blonde, incidentally screenplay by Karen McCullough and Kirsten Smith, who also worked on Ella Enchanted. Elle is your typical sorority girl in just about every way. Pretty clothes, fresh manicure, squealing friends, perky posture and patterns of speech, degree in fashion merchandising, and she loses not one iota of that when she, more or less on a whim, heads off to Harvard Law, where she faces discrimination and ridicule, but fucking crushes it anyway, in no small part because her high femme sensibility allows her to make connections her colleagues can't, and leads her to notice things they overlook. Another form this can take is more no-loggy. Our heroine is not like other girls, and therein lies her power. Now, this isn't inherently rough going. Some girls are not like other girls, and they deserve to have their stories told as much as anyone else. I've talked about She's the Man before, another McCullough and Smith joint, where Viola is actively uncomfortable with the hyper-feminine expectations placed on her, and the whole story only happens because she's able to comfortably pass herself off as her brother. But again, this doesn't come out as contempt for girls who are into frilly dresses. If anything, she's jealous of how effortlessly it comes to her friend Olivia. Fiona fits pretty well into this category too, actually. Her happy ending comes with letting go of the need to be beautiful by societal standards, but it's not about beautiful being an inherently bad thing to be. It's about how, for this particular girl, what would make her beautiful is in conflict with what would make her happy, and she gets to choose happy. Part of why this works so well in both of these cases is that there's an active interrogation of where the expectations of girl stuff come from in the first place. The enemy is not the frilly dress, it's the assumption that you will wear it without needing to be asked. But you can see where this is going, right? Because the worst expression of this tenet of girl power is that girl power is when girl not like other girls, because being girl is inherently not power. And unfortunately, this is squarely where Ella Enchanted, the movie, lands.
Ella, Frau, you are not like other girls.
You have no idea.
You know what's dumb? When girls fawn over celebrities. Ella doesn't do that. That's why the prince likes her the best, because she doesn't like him. She's got girl power. You know what else is dumb? Botox.
You spend less time on your face and more on your maternal duties, we'd know where Ella was right now.
Ella would never. Her face is gonna look like that forever, cause she's got girl power. Hey, you know what else sucks? Fucking slavery. But girls, like Hattie, they don't know slavery sucks. They don't have enough girl power.
I wonder if my opponent has based her opinion on the prince's politics or how cute she thinks his butt is.
Ella, though. Ella thinks slavery is bad, actually, because she's got girl power. This is not a movie about girl power. This is a movie about the one single acceptable way to be a girl. By just not doing any of the annoying things that girls do. Love it. Just as a point of reference here, there is absolutely some no-logginess to the book as well, and not all of it sits great with me. Ella's interest in and talent with language is really beautifully fleshed out as a genuinely unique intersection of her intelligence and her kind-hearted curiosity about people who are different from her, both of which, to some extent, grow out of having learned to live with her curse. Her ability to rebel against orders is built on flawless understanding of the words in which they are given, and her experience with oppression gives her compassion for the suffering of those who are often overlooked. But things can get a little questionable beyond that. Ella is clumsy in a vague and mostly charming sort of way that is common to the girl power aesthetic as a sign that she doesn't care about silly girly things like curtsying properly. Once she's in full Cinderella mode, she often hides from Olga, Hattie, and Olive in the library, remarking that she is the only one who would ever choose to go there. There's also a weird fixation on how much Hattie and Olive eat and how unpleasant they look when they do it. There's an extent to which this could be justified because starving Ella and stealing her food is one of the ways Hattie abuses her when she first figures out about the curse. But it kind of pushes past that in a way that, to me, feels like it imbues food, and particularly the amount of food one eats, with an inherent moral quality. There are a few enough descriptions of the stepsisters' bodies that it doesn't feel quite accurate to call this fat phobia, but it is kind of flirting with it in a way that I'm not a fan of. But what the book really has going for it is that it puts real effort into humanizing the stepfamily in a way that avoids pinning their villainy on the fact that they're girls Ella can be not like. Olga doesn't find out until it's too late that Ella's father only married her for her money. And so while her treatment of Ella is certainly not justified, we can understand the pain and frustration she's displacing. Under the influence of a magically scented flower, Hattie admits to Ella that she's mean to her because she's jealous. She's afraid of everything, and she admires Ella's bravery, and it irks her that Ella doesn't like her back. Again, it doesn't justify her behavior, but it does humanize it. Olive, probably the most heartbreaking of all, is also to some extent trapped under Hattie's thumb and in her shadow, and Ella spends most of the book feeling sorry for her until Olive finds out about the curse and starts following Ella around and demanding that she talk to her, because she's lonely in her own family, and all she's learned from them is how to feel bigger by making someone else small. Again, not justifiable, but so deeply human. You really feel for her in a way you are never ever going to get from the movie, which is perfectly happy to leave it at, they're fucking bitches. What more do you want? Girl power tenet number 2, girls don't need a man. True. Occasionally this shows up as girls who literally don't need men. They do their own thing, they rescue themselves, they get some help from friends along the way, but they ultimately fulfill their own needs and wants without a romantic partner. Maybe telling that just straight up not falling in love is the least common way to portray not needing romantic love. Much more frequently, our heroine will switch love interests. The guy she was with in the beginning is no good for her, so she cuts him loose and finds another guy. Now, I say that not without a hint of contempt, but this can absolutely work. I think it's most successful when the original love interest represents needing a man, and the new one fills the shoes of wanting this man. Elle Wood's great. Her whole world is oriented around the expectation that she'll marry Warner, so when she gets dumped, she tries to get him to take her back, and in the process, she falls backwards into discovering her passion, and her new boyfriend is basically a footnote to her real happy ending as Harvard Law valedictorian. Fiona, also a banger. Farquaad is everything she's supposed to want. He's almost a prince, his kiss will make her into a beautiful princess. Shrek is a weird, gross ogre who lives on a humble swamp and whose kiss turns her into an ugly ogre. But an ugly ogre who gets to choose her own happiness over her society's definition of success. Then you've also got your straightforward girl power romance. Circling back to Ever After, falling in love doesn't even register on Danielle's list of priorities, and she certainly doesn't need Henry, but he respects her agency and he makes her happy. At her lowest point, her stepmother sells her to explicit creep Pierre Lepew, and Danielle escapes instantly, only to find that Henry has arrived to rescue her and has to settle for just proposing instead. Danielle gets to say yes purely and simply because she wants to.
Say it again.
I'm sorry.
No. The part where you said my name.
This, I think, is what Ella Enchanted is going for. The problem is, it gets so caught up in the not like the other girls girl power aesthetic that it misses the not needing a man forest for the not wanting love trees. From the meet cute, this is a romance held together with the paper clips of unearned genre conventions and the chewing gum of Anne Hathaway and Hugh Dancy's chemistry. It really feels like what's happening here is an attempt to recreate the romance from Ever After with much more intense enemies to lovers energy shoved on top of it, because only girls who don't have girl power would want to fall in love.
Actually, I've never been comfortable with the whole adoring fan club thing. That's why I find your obvious disdain for me so refreshing.
Obvious? I was trying so hard to hide it.
So if we think about Danielle and Henry, a crucial part of the verbal sparring through which they fall for each other is that they both argue from the place of fiercely held political beliefs. The movie isn't afraid to take Danielle's side and let her positions influence Henry's far more than his influence hers, but it is her perspective that changes his mind. Moreover, while there is a sense that he is drawn to her at least in part because he is used to being surrounded by sycophants and the way Danielle challenges him is a novelty, it is also immediately clear that she is equally drawn to him, that as much conviction as she has in her beliefs, she enjoys the challenge of defending them against a spirited opponent.
Why do you like to irritate me, sir?
Why do you rise to the occasion?
Their debates are a way for them to learn more about one another as much as they are the way they flirt. Now remember, the reason Ella doesn't like Char at the outset is that she holds the radical belief that racism is bad.
Why don't you do what your people usually do? Steal my land and destroy my livelihood.
The problem is, so does Char.
Look, I have never stolen anyone's land or livelihood.
Ella doesn't actually challenge his core values at all. There's nothing for them to debate. They just disagree about objective reality in a way that has a single provable answer. Ella says, your uncle's government is racist and I don't like it. And Char says, no, of course racist government would be bad, but my uncle could never run one of those. Until they happen to stumble upon physical proof that his uncle's government is in fact extremely racist, and he's like, you know what? I think maybe my uncle's government might be pretty racist. He grows and changes in the sense that he realizes he maybe should get off his ass and stop letting his shitty racist uncle run everything, but that doesn't come out of fun-spirited debate. It comes out of Ella just deciding out of nowhere that she should devote her energy to convincing Char he has potential.
I think you're gonna be a great king someday.
From the word go, Char is super into Ella because he's fascinated by the fact that a girl might possibly not be interested in him. And Ella is like, yeah, you got it. I'm not interested in bystanders to atrocity.
You're the first maiden I've met who hasn't swooned at the sight of me.
And maybe I've done you some good.
But then she just kind of decides Char is a good person for reasons.
I've met Prince Charmant and I think he might be different than his uncle.
Oh, why? Because he's a hunk?
No.
Like, he does a nice thing for her here and there. He saves her life twice. Although the first time it's his own fault, her life needs saving in the first place. But for the most part, it's not inaccurate to say that he gets as firm a no as she's capable of giving.
Stop flirting with him.
Decides he likes a challenge and follows her around until she decides not only would she not kick him out of bed for eating crackers.
I see the score currently stands at chivalry 2, gratitude 0.
You're right, I'm sorry. Thank you.
His lack of confidence is a thing that exists and is a problem she should solve.
It took a lot of guts for you to come here today. Look at the way you smooth things over with Koopa Duck. You're a natural at this.
But he drops a lot of girl power affirming sound bites.
I don't want to make you do anything you don't want to do.
And she's like very feisty about the whole thing.
Wow, is that almost a compliment?
So you can tell it's the feminist kind of getting worn down by a stalker. And this, at last, really brings us back to the book, because this is Levine's greatest gamble in the girl power space. She dares to let Ella and Char need each other. In the book, the couple's love is built on the foundation of friendship. This Char, unlike in the movie, is deeply interested in politics and committed to learning everything he can about how to someday be a good king. That makes him a good prince, but leaves his life overly serious. He's drawn to Ella for her irreverent sense of humor and is blown away by the deep intelligence of which that wit sits on the surface. And the only thing he ever wants from Ella is her company. It sounds like a low bar to clear to say that Ella is drawn to Char for his kindness when she is shown so little by so many, but it is an excellent foundation on which to build a relationship. He is kind, not purely by the abysmal standards set by all those who would bleed her dry for everything they can get from her, but by the standards of people. And they make a great team. It's not that Ella doesn't need Char to rescue her sometimes. She does. But he needs her just as much. In one of their first meetings, they rescue a young gnome from an ogre. Char moves quickly enough to scoop him up and gives the countermanding order that stops Ella from handing him right over to the ogre, but it takes Ella's ear for language to calm the child down and get him to walk with them so they can reunite him with his grandmother. Same when Ella is captured by the ogres on the road to the giant's wedding. Ella is able to turn their own hypnotic language back on them to get them to sleep instead of eating her, but since they ordered her not to run away, she's just playing for time until Char comes along for the assist. With their strengths combined, they're able not only to escape, but to capture the ogres so they can't hurt anyone else and Char and his father can observe them and better learn how to protect their citizens. And it's her love for Char that finally gives Ella the power to break her own curse. As I've mentioned, the book's Ella never gets orders to kill Char. She never lets it get that far. She realizes the danger she could put him in as soon as he confesses his feelings.
In the middle of the night, I awoke, my happiness draining away. I wouldn't escape the curse by marrying Char. I would be more cursed than ever, and he would be cursed too. Suppose my obedience were discovered. My stepfamily knew and would take advantage to improve their rank and fortune, but that would be the least of it. An enemy of the kingdom could put the curse to more awful use. In unscrupulous hands, I would be a powerful tool. I could be made to reveal state secrets. I could even be forced to kill Char. I could ask him to give up being crown prince in favor of his sister. If he were never to be king, he might not be a target. But how could I ask such a thing? How could he accept? We could keep the marriage a secret. That was absurd. The secret would get out. I cast about for other ideas, but none came. Cursed, I couldn't marry him. My only choice was to convince him to give me up.
She forges a letter from Hattie saying that Ella has been laughing to her stepfamily for months about how she's been able to toy with a crown prince, and that she is now happily married to a rich old man. The letter has its desired effect, and the royal family throws a series of balls to find Char a princess. Since the balls are masquerades, Ella decides to make up a fake name and attend, just to get one last series of chances to be in the same room as him.
My heart was still broken. I would see Char and it would mend. I'd leave him and it would break again. There were 3 balls, it would break 3 times.
Ah, Gale. But Char falls in love with her all over again, and when her identity is accidentally revealed, he recognizes the letter for the lie it was, and so he runs after her and proposes.
Marry me, Ella, he said again, the order a whisper now. Say you'll marry me. Anyone else could have said no or yes. This wasn't a royal command. Char probably had no idea he'd given an order. But I had to obey, wanted to obey, hated to harm him, wanted to marry him. I would destroy my love and my land. They were in danger and no one could rescue them. We were all doomed, cursed. Char was too precious to hurt, too precious to lose, too precious to betray, too precious to marry, too precious to kill, too precious to obey.
But it's this order that finally puts Ella over the edge. She fights within herself, feels the pull to say yes, the symptoms of her disobedience overwhelming her, pushes, pulls, and for the first time in her life, she wins. She says no. She says it again. Olive orders her to say yes, and she says no once again. Hattie orders her to go to her room, and she stays put. She tells Char that she loves him, and once again that she will not marry him. He asks her why, and she tells him because she's cursed, finally realizing in her ability to say it that she isn't. Not anymore.
I'd had to have reason enough, love enough to do it, to find the will and the strength. My safety from the ogres hadn't been enough. My slavery to Mum Olga hadn't been enough. The kingdom was enough. Char was enough.
She rescues herself, but she couldn't do it without him. One more time, they rescue each other. With this in mind, I think it's incredibly telling that the Ella and Char of the movie do rescue each other, but reciprocally, not collaboratively. Her efforts at diplomacy with the ogres are worth jack shit, and she only survives thanks to Char swooping in at the last second. And then she finds out about Edgar's plot to murder him and leads the charge to save him. They both fight some both times, but it's clear who is the mastermind in each situation. There's almost a bit of one-upmanship to it.
Saved my life.
Then we're even.
Which I'm not saying isn't a dynamic that can work. A couple don't have to have perfectly complementary skills like puzzle pieces to make for good partners. Of course not. But in the context of this particular brand of irreverent fairy tale, with a damsel who seems desperate to prove that she doesn't need a man by being totally self-sufficient, and kind of resenting the existence of the prince, because of course she would. She should be able to take care of herself, and it's complete bullshit that she can't, but also apparently coming to love him for no real reason, and marrying him anyway? There's something that comes up a couple of times only in deleted scenes. And you know, maybe this is me being unfair because the scenes were deleted, but to me it feels like these just happen to be the two most explicit statements of a theme that runs far too deep to be left on the cutting room floor. They both come after Ella has broken the curse. First, just after the troops have broken her out from her cell and they're on their way to stop the coronation, but they get lost, and so they're arguing about which way to go, and Ella takes charge.
Enough! I am giving the orders now. That way!
And then at her wedding to Char, presumably the last moment before the final musical number.
Kiss me.
Now who's giving the orders?
This Ella responds to her curse being lifted by very heterosexually declaring that till death do us part, she gets to boss around her husband. In the book, when Ella and Char have teamed up to subdue the ogres, standing over them bound and gagged so they can't use their hypnotic voices to hurt anyone, Ella gives, like, a little villain monologue.
You are never going to eat me, I told him in Ogrese, and I am not an it, and I'm not your dinner. And how do you like being tricked into doing what you don't want to do?
In the epilogue, Ella remarks on her new, uncursed life.
Decisions were a delight after the curse. I loved having the power to say yes or no, and refusing anything was a special pleasure. My contrariness kept Char laughing, and his goodness kept me in love.
That's the point of all of this. Ella now has the ability to say no, something she should have been able to do all along. There's a moment earlier in the book when a distraught Ella tells Mandy about Char's confession of love, and about the letter she's written in return, and Mandy starts calling her Lady, the title by which she always addressed Ella's mother.
Stop calling me Lady. You used to call Mother that. Now you're a lady too, she said. If you'd put yourself first and married the prince, someone would have been along to harm him and the kingdom, sure as cabbages. You're a heroine, sweet. The tears welled up again, and I threw myself across Mandy's bed. I'd rather be his wife. On the surface, a moment of tremendous disempowerment, right? Ella literally says she'd rather be married to Prince Charming than be her own heroine. But that should be her choice. Ella didn't choose to be the hero who saved her whole kingdom. She was shoved into it by a fairy who thought that obedient was a self-evidently good thing for a girl to be. But she clearly can choose to be a heroine, and does, and Char makes her an even better one. She should get to choose what kind of heroine she wants to be, and she should get to choose love. Look, I am a grown-up with the capacity for significantly more subtle and nuanced appreciation of art in general and adaptation specifically than I could accomplish in 2004. I have progressed beyond the need to complain about how the ogres are supposed to be scary, and the elves aren't supposed to be silly, and fairies are supposed to have tiny feet, and so is Ella, and she actually found those glass slippers fair and square, and Lucinda should have given her a pumpkin carriage, and Mandy is actually really good at magic, she just doesn't do anything major on principle, and giving the magic book a face and making it spout quips is cringy as hell, and for fuck's almighty sake, why do we have to tack a mustache-twirling villain onto every goddamn story? Can I not just have my emotional denouement? We don't need to do any of that today, but here's what I do need to say. Both Ellas are cursed by being forced to obey every order they are given.
The Ella of the book overcomes this curse by finding the power within herself to say no anyway. The Ella of the movie does it by becoming the one who gives the orders to herself and, it would seem, everyone around her. I have concerns. Alright, so, as we have just learned, no one should be able to force anyone to do anything they don't want to do, and it's extremely uncool to try. So let me be very clear that I am not trying to boss you around when I say, with a total and complete acknowledgement that you are in charge of your life decisions and you should do whatever you want to do, it would be very cool, I think, if you want to check out this video's sponsor, Nebula. Nailed it! Nebula is a streaming platform built and owned by independent online video creators like yours truly. It's been a hot minute since I've talked to you about Nebula, and let me tell you, stuff has been going down. Lindsay Ellis has a whole new exclusive video essay over there. It's an hour-long dive into the challenge of adapting the Lord of the Rings trilogy for the screen, and if you've watched this far in this video, I cannot imagine a world in which that wouldn't be right up your alley. And Anita Sarkeesian is doing a series looking back on capital M moments at the intersection of pop culture and politics. The legends are making it happen on Nebula. And also me, I guess. In addition to all that great exclusive stuff, you can find my whole library, and a lot of my Nebula cuts have bonus segments, or are just a little bit better because I was able to include footage or audio I had to edit around for YouTube. Plus similar stuff from a ton of other creators you already love or absolutely will, and no ads or sponsor reads ever. And the best way to get Nebula is through our bundle with CuriosityStream, the absolute go-to streaming service for documentaries and nonfiction. You know, usually when I do these reads, I try to recommend something at least sort of related to the topic of the video, but I'm just too excited for that this time because I just saw that they've added Particle Fever, which is this incredible and mind-blowing and life-affirming documentary about the launch of the Large Hadron Collider. It was kind of a hard movie to track down when I first saw it, and now it's just right there on CuriosityStream. Oh, it's so good. I'm gonna watch it again tonight. The CuriosityStream and Nebula bundle is always a ridiculously good deal, but if you're watching this video in real time, my code will get you a 42% discount on an annual subscription, bringing it down to just $11.59 for a full year. 2 great streaming services for less than $1 a month. And if you're watching this video in real time and you, like me, have a big gift-giving holiday coming up, a whole year of killer documentaries and a whole year of top-notch independent video makes for a pretty great present. Just saying. When you sign up using my link in the description or by going to curiositystream.com/Laura Crown, you'll get a welcome email inviting you or your most tough-to-gift-for relative to Nebula as well. And you'll keep both accounts for as long as you stay subscribed. You can do whatever you want. I'm not the boss of you, but if you want to be super cool, you should do it. Thank you so much to all of my Patreon patrons, with an extra special thank you to Alexander Brogan, Brett C.S., Data Fox, Eric Danielson, Ilona Concetta, Michelle, and Patrick Berenger. This has been kind of a wild year, and everything I've made has just been infinitely better and more possible because of the support of my patrons. And if my work has meant something to you this year that makes it worth supporting financially at a level that's comfortable for you, that'd be pretty awesome, and it would really help me make a whole new year of hopefully good and meaningful stuff. Patreon.com/Laura Crone. Thanks.
Thank you.